Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Hurst?
Yeah, present.
Attorney Murphy?
Present.
Ms. Naylor?
Present.
Ms. Gresham?
Present.
Ms. Perez?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Here,
Mayor Sarno?
present. And I'd like to take this moment of silence for Coach Brian Collins. Great man. LaTonia, 1934. Against racism. Baseball buddy Califaro. And Chris Collins, his brother. Good loyal man. To take this moment of silence on his behalf. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope everybody and your families are doing well, and happy holiday season. Christmas, Hanukkah's right tomorrow, and Kwanzaa. And thank you for taking time to be here. Tonight, obviously, this is a special meeting to discuss the evaluation of our superintendent, Dan Williams. So I'm going to open up with my evaluation and the reasoning why, and then we'll open it up for discussion, and we'll go from there. So the first item is A, discussion regarding school committee chair superintendent's evaluation for 2019-2020. So in reviewing all the data, again, I think that the superintendent, Warwick and his team have done a tremendous job, especially during these challenging and surreal times that we're facing. He has really kept things moving forward, and the majority of the categories being ahead of the curve. He has also been a leader in the state, preparedness. We're prepared to move to remote education. He's worked very closely with me on the city side to make sure that we're able to move forward to retrofit all of our buildings. It's difficult as it is to run an urban school setting with the administration and working with our school committee. So with that, and based on the information, my recommendation is exemplary and high. And I'll open it up to discussions.
So, Mr. Mayor? Yes. So I just have a questions about the goals, the superintendent goals.
Sure.
Do we set those? How does that come about? Because it seemed like the goals have been the same for the last 7 or 8 years. How can you expand on that a little bit? Do we set the goal? Who set his goals?
Attorney Phelps, can I answer that, or can the superintendent answer that, or what technically?
Sure, so, the superintendent, Dan, you set the goals with the school committee.
Superintendent Warren?
Yeah, I propose the goals. I go over them with the mayor every year, and then we send them out to the school committee for feedback.
Okay, so moving forward, can they be changed, or how does that work? Does everybody's goals get changed, like the teachers or the principals, or how does that work?
The principal's goals typically are around academic achievement, attendance, very, very similar to mine. So the principal's goals and my team's goals are all the same as these goals.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right, I'm just.
The key indicators, metrics we're trying to move up.
Okay, because it just seemed like they've been the same goals for the last 8 years. I don't know if we can think about changing them a little bit, moving forward.
I think that I know the superintendent has adjusted goals when he met other things we continue to do. I know that they're not totally the same.
No, they're not
every
the
year.
same, but they're.
Yeah.
But academic achievement's always one of the key goals. Obviously, attendance, graduation rates, dropout rates, all the key metrics. Now, this year, we're not going to have some of those metrics. We don't even know what's going to happen with MCAS, so we have to think about what we do.
So you're saying this year, 2021? What-
Yeah, this school year, we're not gonna have all the metrics we've had in the past.
All right.
Relative to the past, so.
All right, so all of this is based, this evaluation is based on the 119 days.
This is
Last-
last year's evaluation, 1920.
Okay,
And those categories, you always have the categories of the, and then you have the, subsections off those categories. What you've been able to do, we're successful here, now we're moving to this new innovation. So, I mean, you said academic achievement. Basically, you have those are the categories that you base off of there and how you're handling it. And what adjustments are being made, what's successful. Attorney Phelps?
Yeah, if I could just clarify, the goals are in the broad categories, and yes, they stay about the same year to year. What does change from year to year are the subcategories under each of those goals. For example, when seeds came into development, that was added in as a subcategory of the professional practice goal.
okay, but that's been the same though, right? It's been the same for the last 5 years, right? They haven't changed?
Well, what we did
That's
was we focused originally on seeds, beginning implementation. Now we're focused on the quality of the seeds process, the quality of the feedback we're giving to staff, trying to move the evaluation system forward. So the metrics have changed.
And we did have that, the community input, the input with the community also, when this first started on the, with the season, correct?
Yeah, it was a major negotiation, and yeah, it was a major, that's been a major endeavor because we never had an evaluation system like that before. So working on that with Fidelity has been a major focus area. So that's why we kept it as a goal, but we've changed the metrics associated with it. And then, you're talking about the achievement, the graduation dropout rates. We added staff diversity as a goal. We didn't have that before. We added goals around, we've added some other indicators around working with the empowerment zone, things like that. So they're not the same. This one, we talked about launching Portrait of a Graduate.
Right.
That's our new strategic plan. So there are changes, but the key areas have stayed the same around the key data pieces.
It's a cumulative effort.
But it's moving the needle relative to those metrics changed.
Ms. Gresham, I'll go to go ahead, Ms. Gresham. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just, okay.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes, thank you. So I actually have a couple questions too. So, and along the same lines of what Ms. Gresham asked, Attorney Phelps, do you remember that we had to choose indicators, that we had SMART goals? And so within that, because I understand what Ms. Gresham is asking, like we've had the same thing, so same goals over and over again. So if we know that the superintendent has exceeded in seeds or exceeded in, I don't know, school visits, are there other goals or indicators that we could be looking at that we haven't looked at historically? So didn't we have like this big binder where there were different things that fell under the SMART goals?
Yes.
So I don't know if this is what you're asking, Barbara or Mrs. Gresham, but are there other goals that we could implement so that every year we're capturing something new?
Different, yeah.
Right. If we know that the superintendent is doing really well in one area, the hope is that he's not going to slip in that area. So are there other areas that we're not looking at where there might be a blind spot? And could we help to increase what the overall landscape is? And then the second thing is that, and I don't know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mrs. Naylor, but I know that they started, and it might not count for this evaluation, but for the new year, that they created SMARTY goals, right? Didn't they add an IE They added an IE.
You're correct. Smarty goals, which is the IE, inclusive and equitable. So that we're looking at everything from an equity lens and not just through a traditional SMART goal lens.
Yeah, and we added the diversity piece to the goals last year, so we were working along with that. But these type of goals were what the state suggested with this evaluation system. We're following the framework they suggested. If we have any ideas for some different kind of goals, we certainly can look at that. But these were the state suggestions.
Yeah, and they still are. I attended that seminar last year up in Malden regarding this. The change that was made, if you recall, the change that was made was reducing the number of standards that could be picked. They felt it was not, there were too many that could be chosen from the school committee. But the goals of professional practice, student learning, and district improvement remain the broad categories of DESE's recommendation. And then you can pick the standards underneath that for each of the goal categories.
So I have a question. So then we can change the goals under those categories, is what you're saying?
That would be called the standards.
The standards.
Using DESE's terms, standards.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question.
Ms. Perez?
Yes. So could we measure what are the standard goals and then having implemented the other goals? Because I know we have to go by the metrics, by DESE and all that. I think my confusion when I look at it is what are the standard goals? And if we doing well in those standard goals, and I hear Mrs. Hurst, how we to serve better, what are the goals that other goals that are going to be implemented besides the standard goals? And I think that's what we need to look at and create that formula. So it's creating a formula. So if in that formula, we already have the standard goals, we have to do that metrics and the standard goal. But what are the formulas that are there that we could implement in separating? I call the standard goals the ones that we need to look with implementation, what this is charged us to look at. But then in the formula itself, what others like diversity will not fall. Is it fall in the standard goals or not? Although I attended the conference, and that was one of the goals from the conference. It needs to be defined more clarified.
It's a standard under a broad category. Yeah.
Yeah, and we put under one of the district improvement goals, we have improving staff diversity.
Continue to, yeah.
So we have added that goal. That's one of our district improvement goals.
So
So
that,
under the standard, the normal meat and potatoes standard, the subsections are underneath there. District goal actually lists 7, all the way down to portrait of a graduate, which is new.
Right.
And diversities in
And
there.
diversities in it, yeah.
so the portrait of a graduate, is it a standard goals?
No,
No, it's a
on-
district improvement goal. It was when we chose under district improvement goal.
under
The
that
typical
standard.
standard goals would be the academic achievement goals, things like that.
So if I may, Mayor, I think that Superintendent, what would be good is to sort of look at the goals that we've been using over the course of the last several years. And when deciding what the goals are for the new year, the 2020-21, is to sort of challenge ourselves to think about what else are we not incorporating? What can we take out because we know we have done a good job with those? And what are some of the other things that we can really look at and figure out how to build and progress based on some of the indicators that were in there? And I know that there's lots of different indicators, but I feel like some of the feedback, some of the feedback that we have gotten has been, it's the same thing over and over again. What is it that you all are missing? And so I think it would be helpful to be able to say, you know, over the course of so many years, we did have a laser focus on this. And now we have moved to look at X, Y, and Z, while not losing focus on some of those other things that are really, really important. But what else are we looking at as a district, or what else are we looking at when we're evaluating the superintendent that he and his team are focusing on? If that makes sense.
Floor is still open for any questions or comments. Ms. Gresham?
Yes, yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So under student learning goals, so seemed like we added number 3. Is that correct, Superintendent?
Yeah, that was a part of the new metrics that the state came out with.
Okay, so can you expand a little bit on that, on what it means?
It's the annual criterion reference target percentage was a new metric from DESE that they had come out with in judging the district. So we incorporated that into the regular goals, and that's a metric they come up with looking at all of the goals they have for districts, and they boil it down to a number. So we incorporated that into the goals.
Okay, so then, so looking at that 6, I guess Attorney Phelps can answer this.
Sure.
It says 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 2 out of 6. What does that mean? Under, yes.
So there was one school committee member that put not applicable for that category. So normally there would be 7 votes
Right.
totaled. So in that particular category, there was one member who did not score. And so I wanted to, and that's why I have the asterisk there, indicating that one committee member did not score that entry.
Okay, so what does that measure? How would we know how to?
It's a measure in the state system of overall achievement, building all the indicators in together.
Under student learning.
It's under student learning, yeah. It has all the goals around student learning, all kind of melded into one new number.
But but if my memory serves me correctly, in the binder, wasn't there an NA next to that category?
That category for this year, because we didn't give MCAS, we didn't have that one. So we used ANET instead to do the academic achievement. We didn't have any of these MCAS goals because we didn't give MCAS. So we used the ANET for student achievement. So you had to use the ANET results on all of the student achievement goals because that's the only achievement indicator we had. You know, when we set the goals, we didn't know they'd cancel MCAS. They canceled MCAS, so that one we wouldn't have had any data on. We did have the ANET data, the achievement network data. So there wasn't any data for any of the MCAS goals because we
right. And so in lieu of the
that one either.
In lieu of the MCAS data, we were asked to look at
The achievement network data.
the ANET data.
Yeah.
But on that particular question around the annual criterion, in the binder that we received, it said NA, right? I was the school committee member who put NA because it said not applicable.
Right. We didn't have it for this year, nor any of the other MCAS data for this year.
But I think in the superintendent's
When we
presentation,
set the goals, we thought the state would be having that. They didn't give us any numbers this year because we didn't get the test.
but they said you could use comparable on the ANET on that.
Yeah, well, we
I had
used the
made,
instead.
on my notes, I had made notes on that, what we use to compare, and did mention that.
These are results that the state sends to us, DESE sends to us. And DESE did not send a rating on that because they didn't have the MCAS data in order to do it. So DESE did not send us back anything on that number 3.
Right.
Which they just started last year. When they changed the way they're doing the evaluation, we went to a couple of workshops, if you recall that the thing. And when they changed all of that, this was a new measurement that the state had come up with. And then they said, we're not going to give you a rating on that measurement because we don't have the data in order to accurately rate it. So they didn't send us back anything
I
on
have a
this.
note on it.
But when we set the goals, before the decision not to give MCAS was made, so it was,
So-
we would get those goals. So we used the Achievement Network goal, which we had as a substitute for the MCAS data, because we didn't have MCAS data. We got achievement.
So Superintendent, when do you set your goals? September, the beginning of the school year?
Oh, I set them after the evaluation system is finished, because we don't get the data from last year typically till October or November. The MCAS data doesn't come out most years till October or November. So we don't set the goals until usually January, because we haven't got last year's data to set them from.
And that's presented to the school committee.
Yeah.
Ms. Hurst, I'm sorry, you had the floor.
Yeah, I think that now begs the question or makes me question. So there were other areas in which we use the ANET in lieu of MCAS, and they did have a designation, right? It had either met or
Yes.
not met. So I guess for me, in that particular category, where it said NA, how did some make a decision if that particular category said not applicable and the others did say met or not met?
Yeah, so the others specifically, we had ANET data for. I would imagine people looked at the overall ANET data and then made the decision there what they thought would be. But we didn't have any MCAS data. We used the Achievement Network data. And it's not the same in that category, wasn't in the ANET data. It would be an overall compilation of the achievement. The achievement data from ANET was positive, so I'm sure that's how they rated it.
That measurement from the state blends the others together and then gives you a ranking. While the state didn't do it, I, for one, looked at the ANET data and thought about the way they would normally blend it together and use that as the way to think about it. You know, the people who would have scored in certain categories according to their ANET. And that's how the state does that. It's an intricate measure that they do. You had to make the best guess looking at our ANET data. Where would these kids have placed? And if you put it all together, what would that have looked like?
But leaving that one blank, because it was NA, was certainly reasonable. The other reasonable way of doing it would be looking at the overall data and what you think it would be, because we didn't have the regular data. And we might not have the regular data next year.
Yeah, that's something we should think.
Yeah, so.
Just want the record to reflect that I wasn't the one that gave up Ms. Hurst.
No, not at all. I mean, and I know that they're public anyways, right? But I appreciate that. I was willing to give up my
I got your back.
Thank you.
No, it's a legitimate point. This was a more difficult year, given that the state didn't give us back the kind of feedback that we usually get, showing the categories, the new categories that they put students into, and then saying, okay, because you have this many and this many and this many in that category, your overall, we didn't have that this year.
I remember during the presentation, you asked what could we use to be able to evaluate use of ANET on that.
Yeah, Paul suggested the ANET because it has a strong correlation. This correlation's been over 90% with MCAS. So that's why we used ANET.
Please, Ms. Naylor?
So my first question is, when we do our evaluation, we're looking at our data based on the last school year, correct?
Yes.
So I guess the reason why I'm asking that is, although I understand that significant progress has been made this school year, that we're not talking about this school year at the moment. Like, we're supposed to be looking at what transpired from the last school year and the data from the last school year. And the issue that I have, particularly with the rubric, and why I'm also working on a council statewide to really focus on this rubric, is that I do feel that unfortunately the rubric does a disservice to this whole process, because it doesn't ask questions that are really necessary for us to be able to move things forward. And so by that, for example, when we look at certain categories, they're asking us for whether or not we improved or narrowed or whatever the case may be on certain goals, but yet some of that information is not available. So it makes it difficult for us. For example, ask specifically about the science MCAS data, right? Well, we don't have a science MCAS data to refer to. But I also understand what Mrs. Hurst is saying about the criterion where it says not applicable, because then it leaves us to kind of guesstimate for ourselves, how are we personally going to judge and weigh that and decide whether or not there is an improvement. Now, the other piece of it, which I think is qualitative versus more than quantitative, is that narrowing the gap can mean 0.01 to one person, and it can mean 3 or 4% to another person. And so somebody can look at the number and say, oh, well, we've done better because it's 0.01 better. Well, to me, that's still not enough, because there's still a huge gap and there's still a lot more work to do. So when we make the statement of something being exemplary, to me, and I think I said this last year, that means that there's no need for improvement because we've reached that goal. And if we've reached that goal and it's been considered as exceeded, then we need to move on to another goal, because obviously we don't need to work on this goal anymore. But if the question is, do we still need to focus on some of these areas, then that leaves room to say we still have a lot more room for improvement, and we have maybe been proficient in areas, but we still have other things that we need to work on. And so I just wanted to say that even though I can look at some of these data points and say, yes, we've done better, but to me, 0.02 or 0.01 is not telling me a big story, especially when we're looking at data from a shortened period because we had to end school in person so quickly. And I also am really concerned about the constant calls and the constant issues that we're hearing about from families and whatnot, referring to some of these things like out of school suspensions, like disciplinary actions and things that we're not talking about, that's not reflective in this rubric. So I just wanted to share my concern and just get it out there.
I just thought exemplary, and I've heard it.
Exemplary is on the standards, not on the goals. The goals are whether you meet the goals or not. Exemplary is a rating for each of the 4 standards of leadership that are in the 4 categories.
I just wanted to point out, I know when school committee members represent us at the state meetings, it's been voiced a number of times at school committee meetings. It says here, model of practice regionally or statewide, serving as a model. And I've heard the representatives of our school committee, when they're representing us at state meetings or the mass school committees or conferences, come back, which delights me, that, boy, all they're doing is talking about Springfield, the initiatives, being ahead of the curve, being based as an example. So that's what I base is cumulative efforts here, what the superintendent, his team, administration, teachers, and the school committee have done. That's coming from, that doesn't mean we're done. There's much more to be done, but I know a number of the school committee members have represented us and have always come back saying, boy, Springfield's doing this, Springfield's doing this, Springfield's doing that. So that's how I couch that as being looked at upon a model. I know for a fact right now that we are being looked upon as a model how we're handling this whole COVID-19 coronavirus and pandemic. Nobody in the state is doing what we're doing here as far as we're prepared on remote education. What we're doing to go above and beyond to retrofit our buildings and the investment, millions of dollars that we're putting in there. All this. Now, is it to Denise, LaTonia, there's more to be done, don't get me wrong. So that's what I mean by that.
But we did put out of school suspensions. It's in one of our goals. We have that in one of our goals. That's under district improvement goals as well. You can see that that's on there. So we did include things that weren't under standard student learning goals. And we brought out of school suspensions down considerably. In 2012, there were 4,600. Last year, there were 2,000 at the same time. So we reduced that rather dramatically, but it was flat as compared to the year before. But we didn't improve a lot last year, and we didn't have the whole year to improve it.
Yeah, because a lot of
we've
times
taken it and cut it down by more than 60%.
That's a good. A lot of times you might see any adjustments being done early in the school system to get that child or that student back on track. So then see a decline on that. But again, the floor is open for any questions. Ms. Hurst?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, I think that, I agree with a lot of what you just stated. I know that it has been my experience that I have heard and have come back and shared at school committee that people have, or other districts have been impressed with some of our best practices with We Learn, with our distribution of food, and not necessarily even distribution of food, but breakfast in the classroom. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other things that I could point to. I think that I don't know if it's the irony or where we might need to be careful, because I understand that exemplary to some means that we don't have any other room for improvement. And don't get me wrong, I know that the superintendent is trying. I know that he is working hard. I know that his staff, senior cabinet, all the way down to school level personnel. But I think that when we find ourselves in a little bit of a danger zone if we say something like exemplary and high impact, when we know that there are some challenges and many challenges in the midst of a pandemic. And I think that what we don't want to do while we are being looked at for certain initiatives as role models and best practice is we don't want people to question our authenticity or our genuineness. And so I think that when we acknowledge that there are areas in which we can improve and that we know we've made some significant progress, but we still have our challenges, that people tend to really respect that. And so I think that that's where I have a little bit of concern around the exemplary, because we are in the midst of a really difficult time. And to say that we're exemplary in the midst of this really complex time, I think, perhaps I'm at a loss of words, but I don't know if it sends the right message. It does make it seem as though we don't have anything more to do, and we know that that's not necessarily the case.
Well, I don't think it's being meant that way. I don't think it's a drop the mic moment. It's being meant that I know for a fact what we are doing is really not being done across the state, and we've gone above and beyond. So I'm not saying we've solved everything. There's much more to be done, but we have gone above and beyond. So even when you question that, look at the rules and regulations DESE is putting forth. We're going above their rules and regulations in protection of our children, our teachers, and our staff. And we have continued where some districts, for a reason, they're still trying to get up on laptops and computers and stuff. So that's what I'm saying as far as exemplary effort, things have been forth. I believe in a number of the categories, they've been met or exceeded. There's still work to be done. So we're not, I know the superintendent's not saying that, geez, drop the mic, we've done everything. No, but it's tough enough as it is to run the urban system. We've got a lot of successes. Now you're doing it in the midst of a 100-year pandemic. There could be a lot of excuses could be made right now saying, hey, what do you expect from us? What do you expect from the city? On the city, we got to still provide, we're out there providing services. We haven't used that. That's what I mean by that. And I think, that's what I hear across the state, that we're being held up as an example, which allows us to respectfully push back at DESE saying, our goal is to get our kids and our students and our staff back into school when it is public health wise safe. We're not sitting on our hands. We're moving forward. We're retrofitting our buildings, the eye waves, the Courier air filters, ventilation going on. And at that point in time, when that confidence is there, we'll start to get our kids back into schools. A lot of other districts are not doing that. And now you see some districts who have gone back hybrid or in school have now cut back because they're having issues there. So this takes a lot of foresight to do this. So you have the statistics that are here. We always want to do better. You have what we've been able to do in the past. You have what we're doing with physical. So that's what I mean by exemplary. Yes, Attorney Phelps.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that these are the categories that DESE prescribes, and it's 603 CMR 35.08, and it's the same use of the same words, exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, unsatisfactory, as is used for educators in their review. So, you know, the dictionary definition of exemplary is really using as a model or a design or you know, something that is a design, it's a model. That's what I can pull it up further for you. But I think that's the way in which DESE is prescribing the use of the word exemplary as a design, as a model.
And may I also say something as also, when we look at the rubric and we look at the percentages of folks who have requested, for example, I'm trying to look at two screens here. But when we look at the categories for met or exceeded, or when you look at the categories for significant progress, met or exceeded, the percentage weighing on significant progress and met or some progress is substantially higher than the exceeded, and the same goes for the exemplary, proficient, needs proficient. So I understand that 3 out of 7 of us voted and said it should be exemplary, but there's 4 of us that said that it shouldn't be exemplary. And then same thing when you look at the other percentage, then it goes the same way, where, I mean, in exceeded with district improvement goals, there's 43% of folks that said we exceeded, you know, 47% or whatever, I'm not good at adding, 57%. And then 28% said exceeded in student learning, 28% said exceeded in professional practice goals. So the majority of the committee stated that they didn't agree with that. So I'm looking at not just that standpoint, but also looking at the percentages, which is documented. And then last but not least, as much as I think the superintendent is doing a phenomenal job in leading the district, especially through this pandemic, it's been a group effort. Like, the school committee has been very supportive of our superintendent, and we've been very involved in helping to make sure that, you know, we have our ears to the ground and that we're bringing information back, and that we're trying to be just as creative with coming up with anything that we can do to help, and being represented at the state level and bringing back information as much as we can. So it takes a team to be able to do this effectively. And so although I completely agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that this district is doing a wonderful job in the midst of the pandemic, I also want to state the fact that, you know, we have to look at the data as well. And what the data says is that's not what the percentage of the majority feel in those categories.
Well, again,
Can I ask really quickly if it can be brought up on the screen for those of us who might not have it in front of us?
can that be brought up on the screen? I do not know. But when you look at some, you break down, it's, on many of them, it would be a total of 86%, whether it's exceeded or met. 71% with some tied with 43, or with exceeded 43, and others where there was a school committee member that didn't vote, tied. So this is based on overall summation and a culmination of all the work that has been done and continues to be done. You look 71%, 51, 56, 71 if you do that. And there are some members who scored lower. Few.
Remember, when we go from the first part where we rank the individual goals and the criteria under them, we have 5 categories. And then when you move on to when you have to do the summative, it shrinks down to 4. And so what I'm guessing is in the mayor's logic, he blended some portion because you're going from 5 to 4, you have, what does, you know, he was blending some of the met and exceeded. You know, what do you blend together? That's up to the eye of the person doing the evaluation.
86.
But we do reduce from 5 down to 4. So there is some blending that goes on in that.
So, but at the end, on page 4, I was able to bring it up. No worries, Patty. But at the end, for the final summative, right, which is what I think LaTonia was referring to, Vice Chair Collins, the majority of the committee did not go in favor of exemplary.
Right. That's true.
We were tied with moderate to high on overall impact on student learning. But if you look at the final summative, which I'm thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, is sort of like the culmination. And the majority didn't go that way.
Well, you have an instructional proficient 3 out of 7. You have exemplary 3 out of 7, so 6 out of 7 there. And on exemplary on the next following categories, 3 out of 7 compared to 2 out of 7 on proficient. And then when you go on overall student learning, tied 3 out of 7, 3 out of 7. That's moderate at 86%. And then you have proficient, exemplary, 3 out of 7 exemplary again, which is the highest mark there. And under high, tied, moderate, that's 71%. So I'm basing it on a culmination and summation on that. I mean, it's my recommendation. You can decide to take it or not take it. You can state your reasons why on it, but that's the way I feel pertaining to the backup to statistics and what we've been able to accomplish, what has been accomplished, what more has to be done, and what we're dealing with right now. And I'm not saying we're perfect, but I do believe that for an urban district, we are the envy of the state right now for what we're putting across, which allows myself and the school committee and the superintendent to respectfully push back the DESE on everything that we're doing on it. So to me, and again, I've heard it from school committee members who have represented us on the state level, in your own words, saying when you go to these meetings that it is being put across while everybody's talking about Springfield doing this, doing this, doing that. So that's the way I put it together. But it is up. It is you can vote it up, you can vote it down.
So, Mr. Mayor, did you say take it or leave it? Did I hear you say that?
I see you can vote. I see you can vote it up or you can vote it down.
Under the regulations for DESE, it is the chair of the school committee who presents the recommendation. And it is the mayor's recommendation. It is the chair, and in our form of government, it's the mayor's recommendation, and it's an up or down vote on the mayor's recommendation.
Can I ask a question to that, Attorney Phelps? I understand what you just stated, and I understand the mayor, and perhaps I probably need to go back and look, but isn't there also an opportunity, and I don't know if this came out of the SJC or where, but isn't there also the opportunity where the school committee has an opportunity to edit the recommendation that comes from the chair? Or is that manifest itself in a vote?
I'm not aware of that. There are many school districts that do not even have the school committee vote on the chair's recommendation. The chair's recommendation stands based upon looking at the other committee members' evaluations. And it's about 50-50 split in what different districts do. When this first went into effect, it was the decision of that school committee that there would be a school committee vote with regards to the chair's recommendation. But there is no provision for to answer your question specifically. I know of no mechanism to refine or change the recommendation.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? And I appreciate the constructive criticism. I'm following the letter of the law here on it. And it is up to the school committee at that point in time whether you want to accept this or not. Then we'll move on to the next category. So is there any other questions or comments? Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll again? This is on, we had discussion, now this is on accepting, for the record, vote to accept the school committee's chair superintendent evaluation, summatives evaluation 2019-2020.
So Mayor, I think you have to have a motion first by one of the committee members.
I apologize. Is there a motion?
So
Motion by Vice Chair Collins, a second.
Second.
Second by Attorney Murphy. A roll call vote is required in this matter. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst,
No.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
No.
Ms. Gresham,
No,
Ms. Perez,
we couldn't hear you, Maria.
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mayor Sarno,
Yes, one official votes, matter passes. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next piece, could I just, we're going to be, Mr. Superintendent, we're going to be in a similar quandary about student achievement next year. If I had to guess, we probably won't be doing MCAS again because they've already canceled it for the high school. Is there a way for Paul to equate ANET data into the categories that the state might have put kids in without having MCAS? Could we have them look at that? And see if there's a way to get students in those buckets that the state would have gotten them into to make it easier for us to take a look at this?
Certainly. We can look at it. Paul can look at research. Yes.
Because it would make it easier for us to evaluate.
This was hard. We set the goals when MCAS was there and we had the shift in achievement network because that's all we got.
Can I say something? Is that possible? Sorry.
Okay.
So, I mean, I want to just acknowledge that one, you're right, Superintendent, it was very hard. And for me, it's not personal. And I know that you, like I've said before, are working really hard, but I also think it's really important to sort of acknowledge the results of the evaluation. And so I just want to make sure that you know that and you understand that I do think that we're making great strides, but I do think that there are areas that we need to improve in. We do have our challenges. And I also think that it's really important to recognize what the results of the evaluation are, and not that they're necessarily a reflection of you personally, but more so that, folks are really taking time out to put in energy and effort into looking at this objectively, so that we can all move towards a greater place. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that.
I
Mr.
understand.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Ms. Perez.
yes, I just want to say that based on this evaluation, there was other things that I took in consideration that is not reflected even here. When I took my decision how I was going to do this evaluation, one of the things that came to me, and I need to say this, when Hurricane Maria came, I mean, there's some factors that we don't have here. And looking at some other factors, and I can mention many of them. I think that, and then overall, I created my own formula with the 86, the 71. I even tally the part of the 14% and the 17%. And it came higher. What I think, and going back what I'm saying, we need to create the standard goals, and we need to create a formula that we could have room for the other parts that we cannot implement in the standard goals. It gets confusing when you see at the standard goals, but you put in new things into it. That was another aspect when I weighted this evaluation. In less than a year before the diversity committee came aboard, we already was into 1 year of it. So these are the factors. What I think that I feel as a school committee member, that we have the evaluation, but we should be responding to other things from the school committee and how do we feel in the grading of certain other things and having a feedback about that, rather than having this standard evaluation and just going at the evaluation itself. So we need some type of formula that we could feel, personally myself, that I'm not doing a disservice to this evaluation. If you could understand what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. And I look upon, and it's all about relationships and track records. And I see the beautiful school at Brightwood Lincoln that we're building there, and in DeBerry, Homer, we're gonna build out in Barbara's district. Again, Springfield was used as an example. And you gotta have all your ducks in a row. It was used as an example to be a first out of the box to do these schools, well over $600 million. So that's what I say about the cumulative effort being looked upon as a model on it. So I think I appreciate what you said, Ms. Perez, because there's a lot of intangibles here based on this. So I know there's other districts looking to rehab, build schools. They haven't been able to do it. So there's a lot of ducks in a row to get it done. But I appreciate the constructive criticism, and we'll now move on to C is a discussion regarding the school committee's chair recommendation of superintendent's performance evaluation, salary increase for 2019-2020. The superintendent could get up to 3%, but I thought it was fair and the right thing to do to offer 2% as far as a recommendation, and I'll open that up for discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
I mean, given the unprecedented time that we're in and at this time right now, I really feel disappointed that we are going to be increasing the superintendent's salary. And I mean, he's done well and he's doing good things, but given the time that we're in, I just don't see how we should be doing that right now.
That was taken under evaluation, and also this would be standard when we deal with our unions and or non-bargaining. Again, you could get up to 3, which we deserve, but I think that was right out of respect. So 2 would be standard, which would be when we continue negotiations with our unions, and that would be the standard look. So it's nothing. Again, you could receive 3. He's worked hard to receive that, but I thought in fairness and putting that the 2% would be what would be looked at, and I know the budget it can hold that within reason. So that would be the recommendation of 2%, but I understand your comments there too, discretion. So
May I ask a question? Do we recall what it was? What was it last year?
I believe last year was 2. I believe so.
Yes,
There you go.
yes, 2% last year.
I would, if I may, I would like to echo the sentiments of Mrs. Gresham as someone who, even in my own profession, we all had to abstain from receiving any increases this year in lieu of people getting fired or laid off. I think not knowing what the budget is going to look like next year and the fear that we are likely going to have cuts, that it does set a bad precedent, and it does say a lot. I mean, not to compare other people, but I know a lot of other leaders and organizations who have decided to take pay cuts and are not considering a raise. They're taking pay cuts because they understand the seriousness of what budget cuts are going to be like coming up next year. So I do have to agree that, you know, we've been good about being consistent with raises every year, but I also understand that with not knowing the budget, we could be in a very difficult situation next year.
It potentially could be challenging, but we've had strong fiscal management both on the city side and the school side. And unlike other cities and towns and school districts who have forced furloughs, layoffs, cutbacks in services, I hope that I don't have to cross that bridge on the city side, and I know we're working hard on the school side. So I just thought a fair recommendation would be the standard of 2%. superintendent could receive 3, exert, but I thought 2% would be the standard recommendation on his efforts. But I appreciate your constructive criticism. Any other questions or comments on the salary recommendation?
The only comment that I would make, Mayor, is, well, actually it might be 2. I mean, the 2% is almost in line with what people were talking about in evaluation, where it's not saying everything's spectacular. But we have also given other groups of our employees raises this year, and to give other groups who work for the superintendent a raise and not give the superintendent, I'm not sure the message that sends. So I that would worry me, and I won't vote not to give the superintendent a raise when we have voted to give people who work for him a raise.
But Chris, if I may, we don't know, I don't know that the superintendent give his staff salary rate increase. I don't know that.
Collective bargaining groups we have voted on this year, is what I'm saying, and we have given them raises.
Oh, you said his staff. I thought you meant his cabinet staff.
No, I said people who work for him. Everybody in the system works for the superintendent and the
Right.
superintendent. But we have given negotiated groups and groups raises.
Okay.
Situations are different, and those are usually people who have been underpaid for a substantial amount of time that we finally decided to rectify those wrongs and pay them almost what they're worth, because a lot of them, specifically the paraprofessionals, still don't get paid what they deserve. So I don't think, I mean, if I look at my institution where I work, our president took a huge salary cut. She didn't make us take a salary cut, but it was because she did not want to lay any of us off, and she wanted us to know that before she lays off anybody, that she's going to be the first partaker of trying to do whatever she can to accommodate the budget. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for a leader to say, you know, in these times, I'm not going to have an increase because I understand the circumstance and we don't know what the budget looks like. When you look at the number of what 2% means at the superintendent's salary, that could be a person's entire year salary. So I'm not, and like I said, I don't see it as a disrespect to the superintendent's role. I think, again, we're looking at a pandemic and we're looking at an uncertainty of what the budget looks like next year. So that is where I'm coming from. I don't think that, I can understand your perspective, Mr. Collins, and that you're looking at it from the perspective of, if you don't give an employee a raise, and not saying that you're not satisfied with their progress, but I don't think that's not what my intent is or what my message is. My message is just saying, looking at the pandemic in these uncertain times. I voted yes every year that I've been on the board, because I agree that even regardless of what my perspective is, I do agree that he deserves a raise. But I also understand that we are in a different time than we've ever been in before.
I do think we do bring the assistant superintendent before the school committee, which we did, I believe, this year. And then that was voted, I believe, I know it was voted positive, we might be vote against that. So, but that's my recommendation. And I'll take any other questions or comments before we call for a motion.
I have a question for Attorney Phelps.
Sure.
Attorney Phelps, we just voted on the evaluation. What is the legality in terms of the legal? Is that a standard? This is a learning process. Is that standard? Could you elaborate on that in terms of this increase? Because it's based on the evaluation.
So his contract has the terms of, he is eligible for every year for a 2% cost of living increase, and he is eligible for a performance increase from 1 to 3%, but it cannot exceed 3%. So typically you have after his evaluation, then at the same meeting voted on a salary increase. And so it is based upon the evaluation that you just completed. It can also be on lots of other factors. It can be on what he has done in this fiscal year as well during this part of the pandemic from July 1st to the present. So it's really, could be based upon a lot of factors. You're not limited to just the evaluation.
Ms. Hurst?
So, I'm sorry, thank you, Mayor. So the recommendation that the mayor is making is not based on the performance of the evaluation?
No, I said it is, but it could be for
Oh,
other,
oh,
lots of other
sorry.
factors as well.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion on the floor?
I would move to accept your recommendation.
Motion.
Accept the mayor's recommendation.
Motion by Vice Chair Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Attorney Murphy. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst,
No.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
No.
Ms. Gresham,
No.
Ms. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes,
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, one is officially vote this matter passes. Thank you very much. D is now to vote to accept the school committee chair recommendation regarding the superintendent's annual salary based upon.
just sit there.
Just did
Oh.
that.
Okay, I'm looking at that. Okay, thank you. All right, I had a double take. Apologize, and my fault on that. That concludes the meeting. I appreciate the time.
We do have a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to adjourn to everybody to stay healthy and families and happy holidays. We'll be back together next week for the
Twice, we got the.
Town hall meeting, which Ms.
and the
Naylor-
school committee.
It worked out very well last time. We're gonna do it again, and then we're gonna vote. We're gonna vote on the 17th Thursday, and I believe our letter's gonna be ready to go out to explain to Desi. We have the same goal. That's what we wanna get. This is how we're going to do it. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion by Vice Chair Collins, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Perez. Roll call vote is required due to the Zoom meeting. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Gresham,
Yes.
Ms. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
yes.
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, board is officially vote, matter passes. Good evening. Thanks, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Take care.
My gosh.